Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. Iran already delaying talks after a ceasefire agreement with the U.S. just went into effect. What's behind the delay and what could be on the president's agenda at Camp David this weekend? Newly declassified records released by Tulsi Gabbard are renewing debate over the origins of COVID-19 and Dr. Anthony Fauci's role in research linked to a lab leak in China. Cuba plans to implement the largest policy reform since 1959, but what the nation's capital is saying about not wanting to let go of socialism. Top Democrats have severe weather is slamming the Gulf Coast and the South. Flash flooding, tornadoes, and dam failure fears as the remnants of Tropical Storm Arthur drenched multiple states, the latest on the dangerous conditions. World Cup fans are falling in love with a very American food. But TSA has a warning before they fly home. Don't try to bring that bottle of ranch through security.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us. U.S.-Iran talks in Switzerland delayed amid new flare-ups between Israel and Hezbollah. President Trump urging parties to show restraint as he warns that another few weeks of bombing could strain oil supply and cause a depression. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. So Iris, good afternoon. Tell us, what is the latest?
Sure. So the 60-day window for the U.S. and Iran to now negotiate further details in the final deal has now started after President Trump signed the memorandum of understanding at the Palace of Versailles. Now, all eyes on if this current ceasefire would hold. Now, despite the memorandum including explicitly that a ceasefire applies to all fronts, including in Lebanon, there are new flare-ups already between Israel and Hezbollah based in Lebanon. Now, overnight, Israel says 4 IDF soldiers were killed by Hezbollah strikes, and now they're returning fire by ordering hundreds of targets struck by the IDF inside Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah. Now, President Trump, in a new interview, urging all parties to show restraint. The U.S. has already negotiated another truce between Israel and Hezbollah. Watch.
If it weren't for Donald Trump, and Bibi Netanyahu worked well with me, but he will tell you, we're the ones with the guns, we're the ones with the whole deal, we're the ones with the B-2 bombers, etc. If it weren't for Donald Trump, Israel would have been eviscerated.
Your relationship with Netanyahu's...
It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane.
Are you going to be able to control Israel from attacking Lebanon?
Yeah. I will be. I mean, I wonder. They have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio today also talked to Lebanese leaders in an attempt to de-escalate the whole situation. Israeli officials say that they do intend to honor the peace agreement, but will strike back if Hezbollah targets them first. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance briefing reporters earlier this week at the White House, already forecasting that there will be some skirmishes potentially during this ceasefire. He says that all sides, though, should try to honor the agreement, as that's the ultimate goal, to allow the diplomatic process to play out. Watch.
The President of the United States said this a couple of weeks ago, that a ceasefire in that region of the world just means they're shooting a little bit less at each other than they were before. What you've seen is radical progress in Lebanon, less shooting, less firing, but you're still going to have these little flare-ups from time to time, and that's just the sort of thing that we're going to have to manage through the diplomatic process.
And earlier today, the vice president was here at the White House walking into the West Wing. He was supposed, though, to be on a flight to Switzerland for further talks with the Iranians, but those talks were delayed indefinitely. We don't know a clear new date just yet. Meanwhile, the president, he's now heading to Camp David for the weekend. And he also posted on Truth Social this morning at the White House saying that it's not the U.S. but Iran Iran, who met out of desperation. He also says that Iran is, quote, finished, will play out the 60 days. They get no money, not 10 cents, adding that Iran no longer has an air force, navy, or any radar or anti-aircraft equipment. Now, President Trump, in that new interview, also pushing back on critics, or what he called hardliners, that urged him to go even tougher on Iran. The president saying that if the U.S. continues to bomb Iran for potentially weeks, it would mean that the Strait of Hormuz would stay closed and the world's oil supply would get strained, potentially leading to a depression. Watch.
Oh, why aren't you tougher? The only way I can get tougher is if I go in there for another 2 or 3 weeks and continue to bomb the hell out of them, right? But what does that get us? The Strait of Hormuz will not be open. We wouldn't have oil for months. As long as you're dropping bombs, hardliners, oh, you got to take them out yet.
Well, what are you going to
Let me tell you, and plus I'm not looking to kill people. I have one primary wish as president. In terms of people, I never want to be the late, great Herbert Hoover. So this is the kind of thing that could cause a worldwide depression.
And the president is also emphasizing that the stock markets are hitting record highs and oil prices are plummeting. Now on the news that a memorandum of understanding has been signed between the U.S. and Iran. Now, he's going to Camp David, and the last time he was there last year in June, he met with its top national security team on Iran, and 2 weeks later, the Trump administration ordered midnight hammer strikes targeting Iran's main nuclear sites. So now all eyes are on what this trip to Camp David could bring. Back to you, Don.
Okay, Iris, thank you. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke with Lebanon's president today amid a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. A State Department spokesperson saying Rubio reaffirmed U.S. support for a fully sovereign Lebanese state. The spokesperson said Rubio highlighted Lebanon's bilateral negotiations with Israel as the only path to reconstruction, economic recovery, and ending hostilities. According to the State Department, the next round of negotiations is scheduled for June 23rd to June 25th in Washington, D.C. In a statement, the department said Rubio reiterated the need to disarm Hezbollah and re-establish government control in all of Lebanon. The discussion between Rubio and the Lebanese president comes after scheduled talks between the U.S. and Iran in Switzerland were called off amid fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. U.S. forces remain in the Middle East following the signing of the Iran memorandum, but the U.S. naval blockade is coming to an end. U.S. Central Command posted a video today of U.S. Air Force F-16 fighter jets receiving fuel while flying a patrol over the Middle East. It says, quote, U.S. forces in the region remain vigilant and present. The commander of the U.S. Central Command also thanking troops involved in the naval blockade. This comes as the U.S. Navy ends its blockade of Iranian ports after the signing of the deal. The statement reads, quote, I could not be prouder of our 15,000 men and women in uniform who supported the blockade over the past months. Their dedication and professionalism were on full display every day, ensuring strict enforcement while still supporting humanitarian and aid flow. A ceasefire is now in effect between Israel and Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. A senior U.S. official says the ceasefire began at 4 p.m. local time. The official says negotiators for the U.S. and Qataris worked out the agreement with the help from Iran. The ceasefire agreement follows overnight clashes between the Israeli Defense Forces and Hezbollah. The IDF said 4 soldiers were killed in southern Lebanon when a military tank was struck. The Israeli military says it responded with strikes on Hezbollah infrastructure targets in southern Lebanon and later in eastern Lebanon. Hezbollah says it targeted Israeli tanks after accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire. The conflict in Lebanon could weigh on U.S.-Iran negotiations because ending fighting there is a condition for the broader peace deal. Shipping through the transit of Strait of Hormuz is showing signs of recovery following the U.S.-Iran peace deal. Verified crossings reached 25 yesterday, marking a notable increase in daily maritime activity. Traffic was evenly split in both directions, with most vessels following established Iranian route patterns. 5 sanctioned vessels were recorded among the crossings. The increase comes as talks continue on implementing the 60-day U.S.-Iran framework. Iran says it will waive fees for Hormuz during the negotiation period. Oil prices are down over 8% this week as concerns over supply disruptions ease. Brent crude is trading around $80 a barrel today, while WTI is near $77. The Senate is beginning to digest the memorandum of understanding signed between the United States and Iran. While some Republicans are urging colleagues to give diplomacy a chance, Democrats are raising questions about what Iran is giving up in return. NTD's Chris Bobb reports.
I think we ought to give peace a chance. It's only 60 days. And we're just going to have to trust the president on this one. But we'll know soon. And I hope it works. I hope our giving peace a chance makes peace possible.
Senator John Kennedy is among the Republicans urging senators to give the agreement between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran a chance. He argued the negotiations come after Iran was significantly weakened by military action.
The other thing that I'm certain of today is that Iran is immeasurably weaker than it was a year ago. We have bombed the living bejesus out of them.
Other Republicans say the agreement should be judged by what comes next.
You can't read a lot of details into that MOU. Now we've got 60 days to see what the details look like, and I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm glad the markets are responding well, but the markets are ultimately going to be responding to the details that we all need to see.
Some of the criticism of the MOU is valid, I think, but here's the way I look at it. Without the MOU being signed, there's no pathway to diplomacy to end the nuclear ambitions of Iran. What does that leave you with? War, continuation of the status quo. So the upside of signing the MOU was greater, I think, than the downside.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, meanwhile, says the agreement gives Iran too much while requiring too little.
Iran doesn't have to cut off support for its terrorist proxies. Iran doesn't have to give up ballistic missile production. Iran doesn't have to make any hard commitments on its nuclear program now, and there's no guarantee they make any in 60 days.
Supporters of the agreement argue many of those criticizing the deal previously pushed to end the conflict. Senator Rand Paul posted on X, quote, "The same voices now attacking Trump's Iran deal are the architects of every failed intervention of my lifetime. This war must end. I stand with President Trump on peace." Lawmakers continue to push for more information. Vice President J.D. Vance says lawmakers will soon receive a formal briefing on the agreement.
We do plan to brief Congress very soon. I believe that they got the formal copy of the signed document this morning, and if not, they're going to get it at some point later today. We are planning a briefing.
Lawmakers are expected to press administration officials for more details in the coming days as Congress reviews the agreement. Chris Bobb, NTD News.
Israel-Hezbollah agreed to renew their ceasefire amid a potential Iran deal. Joining us now to discuss is Kervin O'Quinn, former lead intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance coordinator for the U.S. Army and host of the podcast This Week Explained. Kervin, good afternoon. So a ceasefire reportedly went into effect at 4 p.m. local time in Lebanon. So how hopeful are you that this ceasefire will hold, but keeping in mind that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, saying a ceasefire in that region of the world just means you're firing less at each other?
Yeah, well, first of all, Don, it's so good to see you again. Always good to have these conversations. But I would say first, I think Vice President Vance is correct there. A ceasefire in the Middle East only means that you were firing not as much as you used to, maybe every other day in those regions. Look, it's going to be on, I think the onus is on Lebanon here to rein in Hezbollah, to do something about the Iranian proxy that is Hezbollah, to move them away from that southern portion of Lebanon within firing range of Israel, because if strikes do continue, Israel is going to retaliate, and that is going to cause chaos in the region. And look, that is going to upend this 60-day MOU, memorandum of understanding that the Trump administration and the Iranians have agreed to.
So can you explain for us what are Israel's military objectives for Hezbollah in Lebanon right now?
Yeah, I think Israel's objectives for Hezbollah is the complete annihilation of Hezbollah. They would say publicly that it is that Hezbollah puts down their arms and that they become, not a proxy of Iran, but a part of Lebanon that is not opposed to the state of Israel. And look, Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy, an Iranian proxy. Sorry, Hamas is an Iranian proxy. The Houthis in Yemen are an Iranian proxy. These are the proxies that are surrounding Israel at this moment. That's what we should be focused on right now, because it is those proxies who listen to Iran and outside. So Iran has this leverage that they can say, well, look, that wasn't really us. That is just these other groups that are firing on Israel. But make no mistake, Iran is talking to those proxies and they are telling them, hey, keep that pressure on Israel because we do not want a state of Israel to continue to exist in this region.
That's an interesting point that you're making. So Iran has influence over Hezbollah's decisions. And then on the other hand, Iran is saying that we can't have a peace deal if Israel doesn't stop fighting with Hezbollah. So it's almost like Iran wants Hezbollah to attack Israel, but doesn't want Israel to respond in any form. Can you talk to us about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the information operation campaign that was started October 8th after the October 7th attacks from Hamas into Israel. I know I'm talking about Hamas right now, but this is globally, and these are part of Iran's proxies. That information operation campaign has permeated itself through Western culture to be anti-Israel, and everything that every Iranian proxy does to Israel that Israel has to then retaliate to, it then looks bad on Israel. And Iran understands this. They know this. So they have no problem with Hezbollah continuing to strike Israel, knowing that Israel is going to strike back, because they know that the rest of the world is going to blame Israel for all of this. And so they're going to be safe. And so that is how Iran sees it. They can pressure their proxies to continue this pressure campaign on Israel outside of the purview of this memorandum of understanding.
Does Hezbollah have the ability to sustain a long war?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. They don't. Iran doesn't have the ability to sustain a long time war. What they are relying on are entities like Russia and China, small part North Korea, but that axis that I continue to talk about that continues to fund these proxies. So they fund Iran, which then funds their proxies. And look, this memorandum of understanding, by all accounts, looks like it's opening up billions of dollars to the Iranians. And then there's stipulations that the Iranians cannot use this for Iranian military increase, right? So can Iran back channel that to their proxies and move the money to their proxies then? That would then allow them to increase their missile silos, increase their weapons to then attack Israel, because all Iran cares about is removing Israel as a state in the Middle East. And if they can do that, they have won this entire conflict.
Okay, so is that this goal of the Hezbollah-Israel conflict, to destabilize Israel, potentially remove Israel? Is that the main goal here?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And this has been talked about for decades, maybe even centuries, right? I say centuries. I know the state of Israel as it currently exists is not centuries old, but this has been a conflict centuries in the making. And those proxies and Iran has continued to state that what they want is the complete annihilation of Israel. They want the Jews out of that region. They want the Middle East to be an entire Islamic state. And they are trying to do that with their proxies because they can't do it alone. They don't have that kind of power to do it just within their borders. So what they do is they They fund these proxies all over surrounding Israel right now. And that is the intent that Iran is waiting for. That is the intent that Iran wants at this moment.
So President Trump right now very much wants a deal, and he's told Israel, he's told both sides to show restraint. And Trump has said maybe Syria could handle Hezbollah. Do you think that's realistic?
I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about. We have a new leader of Syria that was a high-value target for the United States because he was a leader of a terrorist organization. I think it benefits Syria if they do get involved with the United States and they lean on the side of the United States. I think that helps the country of Syria, but it also helps their government and the leadership there and their president show that, look, they are on the side of Western nations. They are pushing away from Iran, and it can only benefit them. And if that does happen, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does, I think that opens up the region for the Abraham Accords to get closer to this agreement with Israel, and then it opens up the United States to be a better partner in the region.
So, Kervin, you said earlier that Israel's goal is the complete elimination of Hezbollah. Is that the only metric for success when it comes to this Israeli operation, in the sense that anything short of that, Israel will continue fighting Hezbollah?
Yeah, I think it depends on the definition of it. So it depends on what we define the complete annihilation of Hezbollah is. I think Hezbollah would believe that if they laid down arms, then that means all arms, small weapons, large weapons, their mortars, their missiles, all of that, that is a complete annihilation of Hezbollah because they can't defend themselves against Israeli attacks. I think Israel would agree to that. And then I do think that by definition, that does cause the complete annihilation of Hezbollah. They would no longer exist as an entity because then Lebanon could put pressure on them to move out. And I think that is the only thing that Israel would agree to. Hezbollah lays down all arms, small arms, large weapons, missiles, all of that, and moves out of the region, lets Lebanon, the government of Lebanon, take over. We have to understand the Hezbollah is different than Hamas. Lebanon is different than Gaza. Lebanon is controlled by a government outside of Hezbollah. Gaza is controlled by Hamas. Hamas is the governing body of Gaza. So if Israel starts with Hezbollah, they could lean on Lebanon through Syria and make this happen.
Okay, just one final question here, Kervin. You said earlier that it is the case that in the Middle East, a ceasefire means maybe you're not firing every day, maybe every other day. Does Iran see it that way? Because I'm wondering, what is your level of optimism that after 60 days that we're going to get a deal, a final peace deal with Iran, with everything that's going on between Israel and Hezbollah?
That's a fantastic question. What I usually say here is that you cannot fix Middle Eastern problems with Western values, and the U.S. continues to try to do that. And with ceasefires within the Middle East, it continuously is that it's just not firing every day, right? And so what I'm saying here is that while privately, Iran would see that, look, these every other day missile fires is not a violation of the ceasefire. Publicly, they would state that anything the United States or Israel does against Hezbollah, Hamas, any of the proxies, or within Iranian borders would be a violation. They would try to publicly state that. But to get to your question on I have hope that within 60 days we are going to have a peace deal? I am at highly unlikely that we are going to see a peace deal in 60 days. And the reason I say that is because there are stipulations in the Memorandum of Understanding that it would be continued as long as all the players are negotiating in good faith. And because that is put into place, I think this memorandum of understanding is going to get continued. It's going to move past 60 days. And look, we've seen this with Hamas and Israel. There is still not a firm peace deal after over a year of basically a memorandum of understanding or a ceasefire. We still don't have peace truly between Israel and Hamas. We're not going to see peace truly between Iran and the United States, especially within the next 60 days.
Yeah, that's a good point there with the Hamas ceasefire. Okay, always great to talk to you, Kervin. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much. Go USA, and stay safe out there.
That's right. Cuba agrees to implement the largest policy reform since 1959. The Communist Party voting to approve major changes and move closer to capitalism, but apparently without wanting to let go of socialism. NTD's Latin America correspondent Arian Pazdar has the story.
Cuba's National Assembly on Thursday unanimously approving almost 200 economic reforms that would increase private enterprise. Now, the package would address various inefficiencies caused by multiple factors. The planned changes come as basic services in Cuba keep failing. Just on Monday, Cuba's grid operator said that the national electric grid completely collapsed, leaving around 10 million people without power. Cuba's demise started after the end of the Soviet Union, which ended subsidies upon which the socialist model had long depended. Subsidized public services in education, healthcare, and transportation thus deteriorated significantly. Despite that, Cuba's communist policies didn't allow for the economy to grow. This graph by GeoRank, which is based on data by the World Bank, shows the difference in GDP growth between the US and Cuba from 1970 until today. The country now plans to make radical changes, such as allowing the creation of private banks, which has only been state-controlled until now, allowing private real estate development. State-owned businesses could be restructured into private commercial ventures, issuing shares and equity stakes. Private companies would be permitted to hire more than 100 employees for the first time, and entrepreneurs could own multiple companies. But Cuba's president making clear he's not seeking to let go of socialism.
What we are defending here, above all, is the question of how to continue the process of building socialism.
Vice President J.D. Vance on Thursday explaining Cuba's plight and the reason for U.S. interest in Cuba.
It is a system that hasn't worked. They can't make any money. Their economy is frankly probably in worse shape than the Iranian economy. It's 90 miles from our shore, so every time that there's a crisis, you end up having desperate refugees or desperate, people who can't feed their families trying to flood into our country.
Now, the vice president added that the administration is in talks with the Cuban government, and that if Cuba makes positive changes, then the relation between the US and Cuba will also improve. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
A significant development in Cuba, lawmakers approved sweeping reforms to its socialist model to privatize parts of the country's economy. Joining us now to discuss this is Claire Lopez, former CIA officer and national security analyst. So Claire, good afternoon. So can you just talk to us about what has been approved, and do you think it's going to have a meaningful impact on the economy in Cuba?
Well, good afternoon to you. And I'll tell you, this reminds me of nothing so much as a program called the New Economic Policy, instituted in 1921 by Vladimir Lenin in the wake of the horrific devastation of World War I in Russia. And just like this program looks to be now, the NEP, New Economic Policy, allowed for a kind of a mixed economy, including private enterprise that was intended to boost production agriculturally and in the industrial sector. And it did for a while. But then when Lenin was no longer on the scene, by 1928, Joseph Stalin ended the program and reinstituted harsh, totalitarian, communist economic policy. So I do think that our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, very much is aware of all of this and has his eye on how things will go in Cuba.
So, what is your optimism level in terms of how this is going to impact everyday Cubans? Are they going to see a better quality of life, or are they not going to see, or is it going to be a minor improvement?
Well, you know, if they really do institute the reforms that you've just mentioned there, that open the Cuban economy to free market capitalism, yes, then things should improve for the Cuban people. But then we have, you know, these statements made by the Cuban president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, that he and presumably the remaining communist leadership of the country want to continue on the path of socialism because, after all, that's what keeps them in power. So I'm hopeful, again, with our Secretary of State Rubio very much aware of everything that we've just talked about, that they will be kept on a path, you know, towards a free market economy. And yes, that really should improve the lives of everyday Cubans.
Okay, so why do you think Cuba is doing this now? Why is it making this announcement right now, essentially, to the world?
Well, because just as Russia back in 1921, the Cuban economy is in dire straits. The cutoff of oil flow from Venezuela. Also, Cuba used to get a lot of agricultural products, food products from Venezuela. That's not happening anymore. So just as Russia back in the early 20th century needed to turn, at least for a time, to free market capitalist measures, so that is happening now in Cuba, which, as your reporter pointed out, is in dire straits with the lack of fuel, you know, lack of electricity and you know, food, and the common people, the ordinary Cuban people, suffering terribly. That's why. But they do have to be kept on this path and to continue with the implementation of free market capitalist measures. And I trust our administration, in particular, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who himself, of course, is of Cuban heritage.
So speaking of which, do you think the U.S. played a role in this new development? I mean, it may have, maybe it didn't, but I can't help think that just a few weeks ago or a month ago or whatever the time span is, recently the U.S. indicted Raul Castro.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, very much so. I think that the United States in particular, again, the Department of State, Marco Rubio, but others in the administration too, have been very busy behind the scenes. Maybe not all of this was apparent right off, but with the pressure to push Cuba in the right direction towards free market capitalism. And of course, the blockade, or I should say maybe the cutoff of, you know, oil coming out of Venezuela, the cutoff of food supplies, the dire economic straits that you know, really afflict the Cuban people, not the regime necessarily, but the Cuban people who have been in the streets. And we've seen them demonstrating in the streets over and over, you know, chanting, calling for, you know, Cuba Libre, free Cuba. And so I think a lot of that going on behind the scenes, and from what we can see of what is going on in the streets with the ordinary people of Cuba, that this has, you know, culminated. This has resulted in these measures being, you know, approved, at least by the legislature, approved today, and we'll see where it goes, and if we can keep them on this pathway.
Okay, so you said earlier that the Cuban economy is in dire straits. Do you think this approved, them approving these changes, is it out of desperation? Is it out of conviction, genuine conviction? Can you just speak to us where they're coming from?
No convictions at all. They are still, of course, in the words of Raul Castro, of the president, as we've mentioned, Diaz-Canel, committed. They are at the top levels of this communist regime, they remain committed. Well, they call it socialism, but of course it's communism. But it is dire economic straits, I think, and the U.S. pressure and these measures we've talked about that have pushed the Cuban leadership, maybe not at the very top, but certainly the legislature, perhaps more in touch, in tune with the regular Cuban people, on the streets at the local level, push them to approve these measures. And it is up to us, as well as others, to keep the pressure on so that measures that improve the lives of the Cuban people, as free market capitalism does and has always done every place it's ever been tried, so that it keeps on that track.
Right, we have to keep the pressure on. We're all hopeful here. I mean, but I have to ask you, does Cuba have a good record or bad record when it comes to actually implementing changes that have been approved?
Well, I mean, certainly since the Castro revolution and takeover back in 1959, there has been nothing except repression, oppression of the Cuban people, and harsh communist Marxist economic measures. So no, nothing in all of these years, but driven now, as we've pointed out, by the dire economic straits that the Cuban people find themselves in, not the leadership, they live fine, but that the Cuban people find themselves in, and that has driven those Cuban people in desperation to the streets in huge numbers over and over again recently. I think it may be hoped, I think we can be hopeful that these measures will take hold and perhaps lead to a brighter future for the Cuban people.
Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit, still related to Cuba, but a new satellite images appearing to show possible Chinese-linked intelligence facilities under development in Cuba. I mean, Cuba is only 90 miles away from the United States. I mean, should the U.S. be concerned about China's footprint on the island? Talk to us about China's role here, and does Washington need to do something about it? How should Washington view China's footprint in Cuba?
Yes, this absolutely is something to be concerned about. And again, I'm hopeful, and I believe that our administration has an eye on this. The Chinese presence on the island of Cuba is not new. That and Russia's, use of the surveillance equipment on Cuba dates back a long time. And furthermore, we've learned in the past at least a year, I think, that Cuba and China had agreed to a joint military training program between the People's Liberation Army of China and the Cubans on Cuba. So that is of concern as well, especially given the presence of police stations, security stations, in addition to consulates and the embassy of China here in the United States, in addition to the influx of, we don't even know how many thousands of those jungle tigers. Remember those coming up, observed from the Darien Gap by Panama on up through Central America and to our border and across it, not coming through points of entry, no, but in the places in between. Jungle tigers are a special battalion of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. There are thousands of them here on our soil. And again, as I said, in addition to what are called secret, maybe not so secret anymore, police stations, what they call, I guess, national service stations or some such, in addition to 4 consulates, the mission in Washington, D.C., and of course the UN mission in New York. All of that presence. Who is coordinating that? Well, what better place to coordinate it from than Cuba? As you point out exactly, only about 90 miles off of our southern Florida coast. So yes, all of this is of concern. And I might add that another adversary of the United States. Hezbollah has long had a presence on the island of Cuba as well. And we know that, at least in Mexico, Hezbollah has worked closely with the People's Republic of China in terms of receiving fentanyl or precursor chemicals to make fentanyl and to traffic that across our borders. So all of that should be of a lot of concern, but hopefully our leadership is aware of all of that.
Okay, Claire, thanks for explaining. We covered a lot today, so let's leave it there for now. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you.
New satellite images have captured two potential signals intelligence facilities in Cuba that could have links to China. The Center for Strategic and International Studies posting the photos on X. The images were captured by a spatial intelligence company, Vantor, showing two sites under development. In 2024, CSIS said it had identified 4 sites with equipment that could be used to collect signals intelligence, including a number with potential links to China. This week, the Policy Research Organization posted images of one of the sites captured last month, showing an inner and outer circle of antennas, a total of 32 at the facility. A second image from March showed a possible second site in early development. Cuba is only 90 miles from Florida, making it an ideal location for intelligence collection by U.S. adversaries, including China, Russia, and others. A concerning discovery: top Democrats in the country have received over $1 million in donations from major Chinese companies. The discovery comes from filings from Open Secrets, a campaign finance website. They show Democrats took in at least $1.1 million from Alibaba, BYD, and Baidu between 2020 and 2024. Notable recipients include former President Biden, former Vice President Kamala Harris, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, and California Governor Gavin Newsom. The Democratic National Committee, the state Democratic parties, and Democratic super PACs also received money. Filings show the donors were mostly companies' executives, top-level lawyers, and lobbyists. The Pentagon has recently listed Alibaba, BYD, and Baidu as Chinese military companies. This means they assisted the Chinese regime's military through its military-civil fusion strategy. A self-described democratic socialist is poised to become the next mayor of Washington, D.C. City Council member Janice Lewis George winning the Democratic primary this week, with rival Kenyon McDuffie conceding the race. Her victory makes her the overwhelming favorite heading into November to replace outgoing Mayor Muriel Bowser, who occasionally worked with President Trump but chose not to seek a 4th term. The result sets up a potential clash with the White House. Lewis George has strongly opposed Trump's deployment of the National Guard to the nation's capital. She has also supported defund the police movement. President Trump has warned he would consider greater federal control of Washington if what he called a crazy socialist administration takes over at City Hall. Now to California, where no winner has been declared in the state's 14th congressional district. The special election to fill former Congressman Eric Swalwell's House seat ending without any candidate reaching a majority. State Senator Aisha Wahab and Bay Area transportation official Melissa Hernandez finished on top and will advance to an August runoff. Wahab led the field with about 43% of the vote, while Hernandez received roughly 17%. The winner will represent the 14th district through the end of the year. The two Democrats are also set to face each other again in November for a full congressional term. Swalwell stepped down from Congress in April following accusations of sexual misconduct. He has denied the allegations. Dr. Anthony Fauci in the spotlight. Outgoing National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard releasing documents she says reveal his role in U.S.-funded gain-of-function research connected to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. Gabbard says the documents show Fauci helped direct millions of taxpayer dollars toward research on bat coronaviruses before the COVID-19 outbreak. She also says newly released communications show Fauci influenced intelligence assessments about the virus's origin. Gabbard alleges Fauci lied to Congress and helped suppress the lab leak theory, saying the American people deserve to know the full story. The release is part of Gabbard's declassification review. Dr. Fauci has repeatedly denied any involvement in an alleged COVID-19 origin cover-up. Former Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard releasing a new batch of declassified records yesterday related to the origins of COVID-19. Gabbard saying the documents reveal previously undisclosed details about Dr. Anthony Fauci's role in funding research by the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China and its connection to the COVID pandemic. NTD's Arlene Richards reports.
Today, on my final day as Director of National Intelligence,
former National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard closing out her last day on the job Thursday by releasing documents tied to Dr. Anthony Fauci's alleged role in a Chinese lab's research linked to COVID.
I'm releasing never-before-seen communications and documents that expose exactly how Fauci worked with politicized career leadership in the intelligence community to suppress the truth about his actions.
She says documents show that he withheld information about the COVID virus's lab leak origins and his role in directing U.S. funding for the research.
Before the COVID pandemic, Dr. Fauci, as head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, provided millions in U.S. taxpayer dollars to fund dangerous gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Gain-of-function research refers to experiments that genetically alter an organism to enhance its biological functions. The research at the Wuhan lab, Gabbard said, is now widely regarded as the source of the unintentional lab leak of the virus that led to the pandemic. According to Gabbard, the documents show Fauci participated in discussions surrounding intelligence reviews of COVID-19's origins, remained in contact with intelligence officials during key stages of those reviews, and oversaw funding that supported coronavirus research involving bat viruses in Wuhan.
Now, these documents expose Fauci's direct role in influencing and manipulating IC assessments on COVID-19.
Since May 2021, Dr. Fauci has repeatedly denied approving funding for gain-of-function research during various congressional hearings.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute.
Fauci headed the NIAID from 1984 until he stepped down in December 2022. In early 2020, he became a household name when he began delivering interviews to media outlets about the COVID-19 pandemic. The document release was part of Gabbard's declassification review, which included testimony from intelligence whistleblowers who allegedly faced retaliation after challenging Fauci's COVID origin conclusions. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Senators this week condemning Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Both Republicans and Democrats approving a resolution to hold the regime leader accountable for his deceitful actions and human rights atrocities. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
There is no greater threat to America's way of life, peace, and prosperity in the world than Xi Jinping and the CCP.
His resolution condemning communist regime leader Xi Jinping for lying to Americans and committing human rights abuses passed unanimously by voice vote earlier this week.
Xi Jinping hates us. Communist China wants to destroy us. He is not a partner. He is not a competitor. He is a brutal dictator, leading a criminal organization that lies, cheats, steals, exploits slave labor, and commits genocide and crimes against humanity on an industrial scale.
The resolution lists several of the CCP's deceitful and inhumane actions, including intentionally covering up the origins of COVID-19, trafficking illicit fentanyl precursors to the U.S. The drug is the leading cause of death for young Americans 18 to 45, cheating in trade, espionage, more than 60 cases across 20 states documented in just 3 years' time, numerous human rights violations, and suppressing dissidents and religious believers.
It's something they fear more than anything else, fear more than our aircraft carriers, more than our nuclear weapons, is a free people.
The resolution also exposes the CCP's state-sanctioned practice of killing prisoners of conscience, notably Falun Gong practitioners, for organs.
The CCP, especially under Xi Jinping's tyranny, has a particular brand of evil. They seek to control the world, and in their mind, that means destroying anyone who stands in their way.
Xi Jinping was previously caught on a hot mic discussing living to 150 years old or becoming immortal through organ transplantations.
We've heard some horrific stories of these organ transplants and all of this in China, that they take it from unwilling donors, okay, to put it mildly. And the fact that they were caught on a hot mic, first I've heard of that, is very telling. It tells you what their worldview is in contrast to ours, speaking of evil.
The resolution also encourages the U.S. government to use all tools to hold Chinese Communist Party officials accountable, including the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, which allows sanctions against individuals responsible for serious human rights violations or corruption. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
President Trump awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor to 3 new recipients, including one posthumously.
I have no higher privilege than serving as the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. I'm so proud of them. A 250-year tradition of the bravest and greatest heroes ever to walk the earth. But only a few have received our highest military distinction, the Congressional Medal of Honor.
One of those recipients was retired U.S. Marine James Capers Jr., the first black Marine to receive a battlefield commission while fighting a war. He was recommended for a Medal of Honor in 1967, but his commanding officer died before the paperwork was signed. President Trump made sure he received the recognition he deserved. U.S. Army Major Nicholas Dockery was awarded the honor for his leadership in Afghanistan in 2012. And Colonel John Ripley was posthumously awarded the reward or the medal for his actions on Easter Sunday in 1972 during the North Vietnamese offensive. His son spoke on his behalf. The ceremony took place and watched by families and friends of the nominees and 11 former recipients in the East Room of the White House on Thursday. The U.S. military says it carried out another strike on a suspected drug smuggling boat in the Eastern Pacific, killing 3 people. Southern Command says no American forces were injured during the operation. The military says the vessel was operating along known drug trafficking routes in the region. Video released by the military shows a speedboat moving across the water before being struck and bursting into flames. The strike is part of the Trump administration's expanded campaign against narco-terrorists operating in Latin America. The Epoch Times reporter Darlene Sanchez recently wrote an article on the Epoch Times website with the title "Drug Czar" on how she is taking the cartels and China. Darlene joins us now to tell us more. So Darlene, good to have you on. So Sarah Carter was nominated by President Trump to help lead the administration's fight against illicit drugs and the drug cartels. So Carter was sworn in January. What is the key takeaway from Carter on how the fight against drug trafficking has turned under President Trump?
Yes, she was talking about basically how all these organizations, the whole of government, is working together to try to stop, the cartels from getting drugs across the border, trying to cut down on overdose deaths due to drugs in the United States. All of those things are tied together in her role as drug czar.
So you wrote about the discovery of a 2,000-foot-long tunnel from Tijuana, Mexico, by Homeland Security. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, it was an interesting development because, there's all this high technology, high-tech stuff that the cartels are using. The U.S. government, of course, with it being designated as a foreign terrorist organization, these cartels in Mexico, they've been able to use sophisticated, systems as well to detect these cartels and their movements. So it's interesting, Sarah Carter pointed out that they're using a tunnel at this point in the game, and it's probably indicative of the amount of pressure that the U.S. military, that drug enforcement, that Homeland Security, all these agencies are putting on the cartels there at the southern border.
And why is the use of tunnels significant? What does it tell us about the level of border security and how effective that is right now?
Well, I think, she noted that, these kind of tunnels, of course, also are a national security concern. It's something that, it's been going on for years. However, the Mexican cartels have been digging tunnels for years. This is, one of the latest found. But, she noted that, of course, they are, something for the United States to be wary of, because you never know what else could be coming through those tunnels, besides drugs and, human traffickers, bringing, children across that way. So it's something that they definitely, want to keep an eye on. But it's also, I think, indicative of just how much pressure the U.S. government has brought to bear on that southern border to force them into this position of using tunnels again.
So what policies and measures brought in under President Trump are having the greatest effect in combating drug trafficking into the U.S.?
The most significant would be the designation of them as terrorist organizations, from what I understand. And that's because, you can then get the intelligence community, the vast power of the U.S. government behind these operations. It's no longer just DEA, it's no longer just, local police or FBI, it's everything, thrown at them. An example would be going after Maduro in Venezuela. I mean, that was, Sarah Carter mentioned that was, just an amazing operation, highly successful. And it all had to do with Trump's attitude that he will not tolerate drugs being smuggled into the United States to kill Americans. As she pointed out, all these people that are dying, what if a bomb went off and killed that many people? Would everybody just sit there and just kind of ignore it? Or would there be this tremendous action? So when comparing it to that, she's saying that Trump is looking at it as something that is significant, that is dangerous, that is ongoing and needs to be stopped, and that the federal government is going to do its utmost to stop it.
So, Darlene, Carter also mentioned the Chinese Communist Party's involvement in the flow of drugs. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, the Communist Party in China is involved in producing precursor drugs that are used or precursor chemicals that are used to produce fentanyl, carfentanil, and some of these other fentanyl analogs that are used by the Mexican cartels to lace pills, to lace cocaine, you name it. It's, heroin on the streets. All these drugs that people use on the streets are pretty much now all laced with some type of fentanyl, whether it's, regular fentanyl or carfentanil or another derivative. So it is a very serious problem. It has made it so much more dangerous for users out there. As Carter pointed out, it's not really, she doesn't see it as an overdose when, somebody, a young person orders something from an online pharmacy they think is legitimate, like Adderall, for example. And it's laced with fentanyl when they get it, at home, and they take it thinking it's going to help them stay up to study for a college exam, and they end up dead. She said she doesn't see that as suicide. She sees it as, homicide.
Right. I mean, what is the U.S. doing about it? What can be done more to stop China, these precursor chemicals?
Well, there was some cooperation between China and the United States recently. Kash Patel, paid a visit to one of the agencies there in China to try to follow up on President Trump's visit there in last fall. And they had agreed to a certain, framework. They were going to apparently try to, clamp down on some of the manufacturing there. But beyond that, Carter said that they are working with, ports of entry, and including the ports of entry in Mexico, to make sure that these precursor chemicals don't get in. And if they do get in, they're going to be held accountable, including private companies that receive shipping from overseas, from China or some of these other countries that may have these precursors there. She said they're going to be going after them as well.
So just one final thing here, Darlene. Carter also touched on recovery and rehabilitation from drug addiction. She mentioned the importance of faith, spirituality. Talk to us about what positive message did she share about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things she said that I think was so telling was that, all these people that are hooked on drugs now, at one point they were all somebody's baby. They didn't, as they were growing up, they didn't say, oh, I want to grow up to be, addicted to drugs. Nobody starts out that way, is what she was saying. And she said that families need to go ahead and support, their loved ones and friends who are struggling with addiction, as more and more forces come to bear on trying to help them. There's been, significant progress in terms of getting Narcan, which can they can reverse, an overdose death caused by opioids or synthetic opioids. And those have been made readily available to, ER. They're available in the community. Some of these groups that help with addiction pass them out in the community. So it is readily available. She wants to save lives. And the other thing is she doesn't believe in, these areas where she doesn't believe in allowing people to use drugs. That's one of these programs out there where, they have safe areas or safe house. Some of these cities are allowing them to shoot up or take drugs. And she doesn't feel that that is a positive step to help people get their lives back.
Well, all right, Darlene, thank you for speaking with us today, and thank you for your time as well.
Thank you.
A SWAT standoff in the Phoenix area was interrupted when a DoorDash delivery robot rolled up, stood its ground, and had to be removed. Here's what happened.
A police SWAT situation in Arizona took a strange turn when a DoorDash delivery robot rolled right into the middle of the operation and reportedly refused to leave. KPNX reports the robot, named Dot, refused commands to scram by Chandler officers dealing with a weapons-related incident and had to be removed by a technician from DoorDash. Now look, seeing robots at situations like these isn't exactly uncommon. Law enforcement agencies regularly depend on remotely operated machines to do the dangerous, dirty work in standoffs and other tense scenarios. The difference is those machines are usually invited, whereas unless someone on the SWAT team ordered a pizza, Dot the bot was not. Speaking of rolling right through, shocking video from a seemingly serene small-town scene showed an out-of-control car come rocketing past the City Hall steps in Hallowell, Maine. Officials say the Mustang narrowly missed multiple pedestrians before stopping, but thankfully no one was reported injured. They said a floor mat that had become wedged on the vehicle's gas pedal was to blame for the accidental acceleration. And finally, some very purposeful reckless driving in Las Vegas did not go unpunished. In fact, police officials made quite the big show of reducing the flashy rides of a pair of street stunt offenders into a pile of metal shavings. The department says the suspects, whom they called repeat offenders, were arrested on charges including felony evading, reckless driving, and endangering others. The department impounded the vehicles and, to send a message to others, ultimately shredded them into potpourri. They later posted the video with an even simpler message: F-A-F-O.
Waymo is pulling almost 4,000 of its robo-taxis off the road. The recall comes after Waymo identified at least 13 instances in which its vehicles drove into highway sections that had been closed for construction. NTD's Sean Marshall has more on the recall.
Waymo is recalling nearly 3,900 robo-taxis in the United States. The company owned by Alphabet says there's a software issue that could cause the vehicles to enter a closed freeway construction zone and continue driving. It is the second recall by Waymo in just over a month. The self-driving software in Waymo Auto Taxis is not always able to recognize construction zones and ramp closures. Officials say there were several instances in San Francisco and Phoenix where the robo-taxis drove into zones that were closed, posing a potential crash hazard. Waymo Robotaxi service is yet to be available in New York. The company has formed a political action committee called Upward NY in hopes of gaining approval to operate in the state. But the proposals for auto taxis in New York are being met with fierce opposition. Pushback is coming from labor unions and advocates that include the Independent Drivers Guild, which represents drivers on apps such as Uber and Lyft, according to a recent Times Union article. A spokesperson for Waymo says the company has identified an area of improvement regarding performance around freeway construction zones. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Meanwhile, TSA has a message for international travelers flying home from the World Cup. You cannot take home bottles of ranch dressing on a carry-on. The popular condiment has captured the taste buds of international visitors to the States. Excuse me. In an Instagram post, TSA reminds airline passengers that all liquids more than 3.4 ounces need to be packed in, checked, and not on a carry-on. Ranch dressing is uniquely American as it was invented in Nebraska, perfected in California. World travelers coming over to the games are discovering the delight of its tangy flavor on all kinds of food, from pizza to vegetables. And meanwhile, Kraft Foods is not missing the opportunity to tap into visiting international soccer fans falling in love with ranch dressing. In a social media post, Kraft says it's working on TSA-compliant ranch. It would give travelers a kit that includes a stash of ranch dressing packets. There's also a bottle of ranch-inspired luggage tag as a souvenir. It's not yet available, but Kraft says it's working on it. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, I've been seeing you so much in studio lately.
I was just saying that, I was just thinking that. I was like, Don, you getting sick of me yet? I'm not sick of you.
No, of course not. This is a welcome change of pace compared to
know.
before. So a lot of news. We have baseball, some World Cup news, but let's talk golf first. The second round of the U.S. Open started this morning. So what does the leaderboard look like?
Yeah, Wyndham Clark is still on top right now. He started the day in the lead after shooting a 6 under 64 yesterday in round one. Today, it shot a 1 under 69, so he's now 7 under for the event, putting him well ahead of second place Xander Schauffele. Meanwhile, Dustin Johnson was the closest to Clark entering today. He shot a 4 under 66 yesterday. Today, a completely different story. The guy got a quadruple bogey on the 15th hole as he shot a 7 over 77 for the day. He's now 3 over for the tournament. We'll actually have to see if he is indeed making the weekend cut. Meanwhile, number one ranked Scottie Scheffler shot a 2 over 72 yesterday. That put him 8 shots behind Clark. He may be the best in the world, but he's definitely not known for getting hot starts. Now, he just teed off in round 2 a few minutes ago, so we're watching him. Ditto for number 2 ranked Rory McIlroy. Shot a 1 under 69 yesterday. He just teed off a few minutes ago as well for his second round. Now, after today, only the top 60 golfers plus ties will make the weekend cut. That is out of 156 for this event, so we'll be continuing to watch this all afternoon.
So we have baseball news next, but let me ask you before that. Do you prefer watching baseball or golf? Which one is slower for you?
Which one is slower? I'm going to say golf is slower today. I will put an asterisk there. When Tiger Woods played and he was in his prime and ahead and in one of these majors, golf was number one. Golf was at least ahead of baseball. It was a lot more fun to watch. Baseball has done better recently. They have that pitch clock now. You can't just sit out on the mound for 90 seconds in between each pitch, and doing whatever out there. They've got that 20-second. So they sped up the game of baseball a little bit. It's still, they still have the issue of too many strikeouts and walks. There's not enough balls in play. But for me, it's still generally better than golf. That's where I'm at anyway.
Okay, speaking of which, Detroit Tigers ace Tarek Skubal yesterday commented about possibly being traded this season. Why would the Tigers possibly trade the 2-time reigning AL Cy Young winner?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense on paper, but there are some good reasons for it. For one thing, the Tigers are not playing well. They are tied for last place in the AL Central. They got that 30-44 record. That's after making the playoffs last year where they were 87-75. Skubal, meanwhile, he's set to be a free agent after the season. It's no secret that Detroit has not been able to assign him to an extension. So if they held on to him and don't make the playoffs and he leaves in free agency, all they would get is a little bit of draft pick compensation return. That's generally much less than what you get if you trade him just before the trade deadline, which will be August 3rd this year, and he's like a 2-month rental for the team. Now, the price for that is still going to be sky high. He's won the last 2 American League Cy Young Awards. He's only 29 years old. So you're definitely getting someone in his prime. He was out with that injury for about a month, but he's looking good in his return. He pitched last week. Today he's going to pitch again against the Chicago White Sox today. That game starts at 6:40 Eastern time today.
All right, so moving on to the big one here, the World Cup. Team USA set to face Australia in just a few minutes. So talk to us about this. What is the status of U.S. star attacker Christian Pulisic?
Yeah, this is just in. He is out for the match with that calf injury. The U.S. will start Ricardo Pepi in his place instead. Now, this is all after head coach Mauricio Pochettino said yesterday that Pulisic was doing much better. Now, Pulisic first injured the calf last week during training. He then aggravated it last week in their win over Paraguay. That was last Friday. He was subbed out at halftime of that game, which the U.S. won 4-1. But you could see their play kind of dropped off after halftime there. I mean, it's no surprise he is their best player. So the U.S. is going to play Australia today, 3 p.m. Eastern time, out in Seattle without Pulisic. That'll be the first of 4 overall matches today. We also have Scotland versus Morocco at 6 p.m. Eastern time out in Foxborough, Massachusetts. Then at 8:30, Brazil plays Haiti. That's going to be played in Philadelphia. And finally, Turkey plays Paraguay at 11 p.m. out in Santa Clara, California. But yeah, it's unfortunate that Pulisic is going to be out for this match. I mean, it sounds like he could be back. The way Pochettino was talking earlier this week, if he didn't play tomorrow, which he hadn't been practicing with the team this week, so it wasn't that big of a surprise. If you haven't practiced, you're probably not going to play. But next week they've got a game. I think it's next Friday again. So it sounded like probable that he would be at least able to be back for that match, but we'll have to see.
You know, we actually have a few Australia supporters at this office.
Yes.
And I was in a pitch meeting earlier today, and people were saying friendships could be broken today.
the Socceroos, I believe, that the Australian team is called. So Socceroos. And hey, you know, Canada had a big win the other day too. Their first ever win, 6-0. We've got a number of different countries actually represented in this office. Australia is one of them as well. I might be in the minority rooting for the U.S. team today. We'll have to see.
You're rooting for the U.S. We'll see how many friends you have left after today.
We'll see how loud I am in the office, you know, after they score or something like that, or how angry I am after they lose. We'll have to see how that goes.
Okay, all right. Good to speak with you, Dave. Thank you very much.